a very tight connection.
It should snap right in.
Yeah, it's snapped in, but that's the only place it would go. Let me go get my power cord.
Okay.
Priya, can City Council get their emails if the network is down?
I do not know.
Email seems to be working okay.
Okay.
But they can always join by clicking on the link in the agenda. That's actually a really good point. But I thought that with a migration to a 365, it should change. I think we're live now, so.
Yeah, so I got a hold of Marin IT, and he said with that migration, they should be fine.
Great. Thank you, Cindy.
Oh, my video's turned off.
Oh yeah, sorry, I turned it off. I can turn it back on.
Okay.
Okay, you should have just received, there we go. I think that's a lot better, Maya. And
Okay,
it looks
good.
like our vice mayor is here. That's wonderful because I'm seeing people join, yay.
Maya, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm appearing from home today. Hey, Jeff, long time.
Yeah, it's been a while. I'll be right there.
Cindy? Are you able to hear me okay?
Sound perfect.
There's no delay?
No,
I've never done it from this room in my house. I just want to make sure. Okay.
So is it the apocalypse yet?
No, I think we're working through it.
Okay. Okay, that's Callie. Say goodbye, Callie.
Cindy, will you tell me when we're?
Sure,
Will you tell me when we're ready?
Or just give me another minute, please.
Yeah, take your time.
Just one more minute.
Sure.
We're ready to start the meeting.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I'm going to call to order the City of St. Helena Special City Council meeting, Tuesday, September 8th, 4 p.m. I'm going to read our special paragraph regarding remote meetings. This is in accordance with Executive Order N-29-20 and guidance from the California Department of Public Health on gatherings. Remote public participation is allowed. We will address the order in the following ways. Members of the public may not physically attend meetings. The City Council meeting will be live streamed on Comcast Channel 28 and on the city's website, barring technical difficulties. Those members of the public wishing to participate must do so remotely via Zoom electronic meetings in the following ways: by either logging onto the Zoom link located on the meeting agenda. Please download the app to your computer or mobile device and enter the meeting ID, or by calling a listed number and entering the meeting ID. Public comment for City Council meetings will be accepted via email to publiccomment@cityofsthelena.org. All public comments must be emailed by 4 p.m. prior to the meeting. Emailed public comments will not be read aloud, but will be publicly available and attached to the online City Council agenda. Please see the end of the agenda for detailed public participation instructions. With that, then we will have our roll call.
Mayor Ellsworth,
Here.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Here.
Councilor Knudsen,
Present.
Toe,
Here.
Oberstein.
Here.
Very good. And we'll save the flag salute for the later meeting, and we'll move to public comment, which in a special meeting under California law, public comments at special meetings are limited to subjects on the agenda item only. Therefore, public comment will take place during consideration of the item, where each person's comments shall be limited to 4 minutes. So we'll open public comment when we get into the item. Cindy, I'm seeing your hand.
Yes, I just wanted everyone to be aware that we've had some issues today at City Hall and with connectivity to get email and whatnot. So there might be some public comments that are straggling in that did not get attached to the agenda, but they will get attached as soon as I think it's.
Okay, and we're having a little trouble. I am certainly hearing your voice, Cindy. It sort of faded in and out.
Yes, it's doing that for everyone, Cindy.
Oh, no. Okay.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear me at all?
I can hear you now. It kind of comes and goes a little bit, but we can work forward and see where things go. With the new item, I'm going to hand it off. This is item 4.1. This is review and discussion of prioritization of long and short-term goals related to housing. And I'm going to hand this off to City Manager Mark Prestwich.
Thank you, Mayor. I may also have some sound issues, so please let me know if I'm coming through clearly. I'm in the same building as Cindy.
We're getting a little echo with you, but we can hear you.
Okay, I may switch to a phone after just some brief introductory remarks. So this is a workshop. This is a workshop intended to organize one of the goals in the 2020 work plan is to take a number of tasks from our housing element of our general plan, and also a number of the ideas from the housing white paper that was commissioned by the council in 2018. And what we are going to share with you tonight, in partnership with the work of Councilmember Koberstein and Councilmember Knudsen, is a first glance at organizing all of these ideas into short and long-term tasks for the city. And the intent really is to focus our work as we advance important policy matters in the housing space. Today, Priya Nixon, our assistant to the city manager, will facilitate the discussion, and Maya DeRosa, our planning director, myself, are available to answer questions that you have. And we appreciate the work of the council members as we have brought this to you today. We're looking for feedback from the full council and community feedback on the prioritization of tasks. It doesn't mean that we can't add other ideas to the list as well. And certainly our housing goal has other tasks that are already identified in our current work plan. So with that, let me turn it over to Priya, and we'll get started.
Thank you so much, Mark, and good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm having a little bit of connectivity issues, so bear with me, please, and let me know if I drop off. I have a backup here. Thanks so much for those comments, Mark. And I think, when we sort of take a step back, because we've presented a lot of information in this staff report, just to piggyback off of what Mark said, this entire exercise really involved, taking a lot of good ideas from the housing element and from the housing white paper and organizing them. And I would definitely like to commend Councilmember Koberstein and Councilmember Knudsen for their time, as we have given them a glimpse of this and received some feedback. And one of the things that we noticed is that a lot of work is already underway. And so what we've done today is we've prepared some attachments. And as you may recall from the housing element, there are 6 goals. So what I've done with the help of Maya and Mark is organize those goals and add in items from the housing white paper. And then, as Mark talked about earlier, we're really interested in getting some feedback on the prioritization of the longer term and the shorter term goals. And we have actually put together, so for each goal, you'll see that there's a category for long and mid and short term, and there's also a degree of difficulty. What we've also done is we've created we've taken the shorter term goals that are supposed to be, 1 to 2 years, and we created 2 sheets that are 2 attachments. They're listed first and second in your packet, focused on year 1 and year 2. And you'll probably notice that year 1 really does talk and reference the zoning code update. And what we did was we spoke to the consultant team, Lisa Wise Consulting, to get some more feedback on, is there any more information that we should share, or what does that really look like? What does that action item really look like in terms of the zoning code? And then we attached the year 2 for your perusal as well. So I don't know, Mark, if you have anything you'd like to add, or Maya, if you have anything you'd like to add to that. But with that, I am happy to, I have all these attachments up on my screen, and I'm happy to pull them up at any point if we'd like to discuss them, but we really are looking for your feedback and questions regarding the prioritization of these. So thank you.
I'll just jump in real quick. And we started with at a staff level with taking all of the ideas, all the tasks and the ideas from the white paper and getting them organized. And the first question was, does this belong in the short-term box or the longer-term box? Short-term defined as 1 to 2 years, long-term defined as 3 to 5 years. And that first exercise was done at a staff level. It was reviewed by our planning director and the city manager. And then we presented this draft to the council members for review. And from there, we refined the list that you have today. So with the feedback from the council, I think we moved a few of the long-term items into the short-term. We clarified a few items. We've also added a metric of degree of difficulty, because that really is meaningful to a small city in terms of what we're able to take on with a relatively small staff. And so what Priya has available for us today is we intend to focus primarily on the short-term goals. So our initial question is there anything in the long-term bucket that belongs in the short-term bucket? But, and after answering that question, our focus is the first, for the short-term bucket, did we get it right in terms of what belongs in year 1 and what belongs in year 2? And as Priya pointed out, a lot of the work of the zoning code finds itself in the first year bucket. So we know we are already advancing a lot of those tasks that were called for in the housing element, but we want your feedback today on what this list looks like, and our focus for the conversation will be primarily the short-term bucket.
Mr. Doring?
Thank you. I think it would be important for me, just from a process point of view, but also because I'm interested, to hear from the subcommittee, not so much on the details necessarily, but just in terms of the overarching approach that was taken to sort of go through this list, and sort of what kinds of things were talked about that would make something go into one category or another, from more of the community's perspective. Not so much maybe necessarily the capacity issues or the difficulty issues. I think that would be very educational for me to kind of have just a general understanding of how you tackled the issue and how you came up with it. Again, I don't necessarily need to get into the detail, but I think it would be important to sort of set the stage for us as we discuss this.
David or Mary, do you want to jump in for a moment in response?
Go ahead, Mary.
Well, as both Priya and Mark said, a lot of these things are contemplated as being handled in the zoning code update. And so they naturally fell into the shorter term list. Probably the overwhelming number of them, and things that were more difficult or required further legal analysis maybe, or further studies, just got moved into the next year, just to try to manage the workload.
David, any thoughts? Thank you. David, any thoughts? Priya?
Yes. would it be helpful to take a look at what those items are in the current year one?
Sure.
Let me just check with Paul. Paul, does that give you some context?
I think so. I'm just, we're trying to mediate between staff capacity and urgency in the community, and I'm trying to figure out how that was mediated. And, I guess the terms and the degree of difficulty are a little nebulous, and I understand it's hard to kind of prioritize these. Yeah, I think that's enough for me for now. We'll get into it. Thanks.
Okay.
I think just briefly, the other context was we were looking to try to balance the number of initiatives and spread them over the 5 years or longer in some cases. But the attempt was to balance the number of tasks in any given year so that we didn't stack one year higher than others. The good news is a lot of the ideas that were contained in the housing element are already in motion with the zoning code update. So you see that, and I think if we walk through what we want to make sure we walk away with today is there anything in the long term that you really believe should be included in the short term? And if we answer that question and we're comfortable, then our focus would be to look at year one and year two of these tasks and make sure that the council has a comfort level with the various initiatives.
Okay. I do believe that the conversation is important about what our goals are and then also what our capacity is. I do think that sort of the culture here that we've been working on of staff retention and good dialogue between everybody is helping us as a council understand more about capacity at the same time as trying to make sure we're achieving all the goals. So with that, Mark or Priya, do you want to take us forward?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to, we can either do one of two things. We can talk first about if there are any feedback from the longer term items that we want to reevaluate and think about. Or we can also just start looking in at year one and year two. So I'll let you, Mayor Ellsworth, sort of tell me what you would like, and I can pull up those documents.
I think looking at the year one and two first might give us the kind of context we need, and see then as we look at the long-term goals what we might have missed in the earlier, if so. Maya, I'm seeing your.
And the other thing I just want to put that might be helpful context is we are nearing the end of our current housing element cycle, and we're going to be getting new numbers sometime in the spring of next year. We're looking to get a consultant on board to start the housing element and start community outreach discussions. So keep in mind, like for some of the goals that are post 2 years from now, because we need to have actually a certified new housing element January of 2023. So what I want the council and the community that's listening today to not be concerned if we don't get everything done in the 2 years. What is so excellent is because of, for example, the white paper, going into this next housing element cycle, we have an incredible policy framework to start a conversation from, in addition to all the new community input that, tells us how the housing situation has changed, how we need to fine tune some of the policies. So this is the whole housing discussion, as a director, I look at it as an ongoing and evolving policy movement. As you see, just as things come from the state, the shift in all the housing legislation. So, both our zoning code, our new housing element, not only has to meet all those minimum requirements, but be very agile to meet the unique needs of our community. So I just hope that in a broader sense adds more context to some of these longer policies that we will take a fresh look at them as we start advancing the next draft of the housing element. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Knudsen, David?
And I think the other thing to keep in mind, which isn't explicitly pulled out here, but Priya and Maya, maybe as we further iterate on this, is that, it'd be great to also sort of know the existing housing stock, right? So we've got existing housing stock in different zoning classifications. We've got existing housing stock that's a variety of aged, right? There's stuff that's very old and things that are more modern. It'd be really interesting as we think about what are our requirements from the state to sort of apply them to our community as it's currently built. We have a number of second homes that now are, many people have torn down homes and rebuilt new homes in neighborhoods that were before sort of older neighborhoods. And so having sort of a sense of that, I think, would be also a useful add as we move forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we'll bring it back to Priya.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen here, and I hope that you can all see it. I understand that it's a lot of information to look at, and you should be able to see the short-term housing goals year one related to the zoning code update. Mayor Ellsworth, are you able to view that?
I can see that, yes.
Great. And so just to kind of orient the folks in the public here and anyone, what we've done is we put our degree of difficulty, and then we have referenced the guiding policy and the housing element, or if it's part of the housing white paper. And then, as I mentioned, staff did run this by the Lisa Wise Consulting Group, and we did provide some just information as related to these items. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that that these comments are here to support the action goals. So with that, I will, if there's any feedback or questions, Maya's here to help answer those, and I welcome your feedback.
Do you want to just begin? I don't know quite what the process you want to do in terms of presenting these. Do you want to sort of work through them, and as we get past each one, we see if there's any questions from the council?
So that's definitely one option. I guess another question would be, are there any specific questions right now that the council might have on any of these items here that are represented in year one related to the zoning code update that might need clarification? As Maya mentioned, a lot of these will be happening, or they're already happening. So they're in motion right now. So I'm happy to answer specific questions about that. Are there any, or would you like to kind of go through these?
My thought is that you can go through them and summarize them for us, and then as questions come up. Am I seeing any other thoughts on council in terms of process here? Okay, so I think that would be good, Priya, if you can just sort of start walking us through, and then as questions come up, we can take them.
Sure, most certainly. And I would also encourage Maya and Mark, if you have any comments that you want to add related to this. I think the first one here, we're still waiting on a little bit of feedback from the Lisa Wise Consulting Group related to the growth management system. And so we're kind of waiting to hear on that one. These all, really the remainder of them, and I'm looking at my screen over here, so talk about different types of elements related to like this one is about the co-housing and the green and the manufactured homes. And so I think the comment here kind of speaks for itself and explains that there's going to be flexibility in the code, and that sort of helps accomplish that action. And so to me, some of them are a little bit, I think, in the Lisa Wise comment column self-explanatory. So, for example, for 3, the definition of family is something that's going to be, the code will modify that definition. I guess another question for the council would be, like, do you have further questions on that? Does that make sense? Maya, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add regarding any of these particular items. Again, these are pretty much happening in the zoning code update.
I think it would be useful, Priya, it'd be useful for you to talk through, or just one line on each element, right? I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So, so we talked a little bit about line 1 right here, which is number 1. I went through and talked a little bit about line 2 and 3. And so 4 really references, the development of cottage and pocket neighborhood standards. And so the code is going to allow flexibility in housing in terms of types of form. So whether that's a townhouse or a cottage. And 5 here references, consider adding creative development and design goals for the general plan. This isn't directly related to the code update. I'm wondering, Maya, if you want to jump in and talk a little bit about 5.
Can I ask a question too about
Yes.
4? What is cottage housing and pocket neighborhood exactly?
I can respond to that. There's actually a really big trend in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Portland area. They're called cottage court development homes. And the whole idea is it's a very small footprint and small lot development with the idea of it all being centered around like an open green. And it's also very neighborly friendly. Most of the homes are very modest homes, but they have very nice and open front porches and little mini gardens as private open space. And then imagine like a horseshoe and imagine like small little homes around the footprint of a horseshoe, and the inside of the horseshoe is like a common green. And so that actually, when I was in Healdsburg, we were able to do a really amazing project on just 1 acre of land that, the project needed 4 variances because most cities' zoning codes aren't currently written to allow, 0 lot lines or more innovative practices. But as we start looking at what are ways where we can maximize the small amount of infill residential lots that we have, and also, smaller footprint homes make more affordable, and also really create developments that aren't garage doors where you go in and out and you don't know anybody. It's really creating a sense of community. It's like a win-win. And so this is a very exciting new trend in housing development that's really taken off in the last decade, and it's caught on in California, but most of our codes are very antiquated. So this would be an example of when the new development standards come out for residential, that we would have a set of zoning standards for developers that want to do exactly that type of housing.
And is this one tied to number 7 with the senior parking being different? Like I would think, how do you do the parking if there isn't a garage and there are these smaller units?
Well, actually, in a lot of developments, it's a detached garage in the back. And in the project I work on in Healdsburg, actually, some of them had ADUs above them. So so each, there wasn't more than 1 parking space per unit, but that's another thing that you have to look at. How to really maximize the housing, still allow for some minimum parking on site, but not typically the full parking standards that you would see for a single family home. So yeah, those two go together.
And is that because seniors don't typically need as much parking or cars?
I would say that's an attributable factor, that there's usually shuttles or other forms of transportation they use.
Okay, thank you.
I saw, just a touch base on that, I saw a very attractive project in Petaluma, sort of this concept. Mm-hmm. And when you see what can be done, it really, you start thinking of the possibilities and opportunities. So I think this is excellent to see here. Okay.
Okay, so I zoomed in a little bit more, but I'm going to have to move around a little bit so that folks in the public can see this. And, as I mentioned, all of these are really related to the zoning code update. And so, Maya, I'm going to maybe ask you to tag team a little bit with me and provide, I think your explanations are really helpful. So thank you for that. And so it's I'm going to zoom out just a little bit, and then I'll go back in. Okay, so we talked a little bit about 5, and 6 is, explore amending building and zoning code and permitting procedures to facilitate single room occupancy. And so the code will allow this. I don't know if there are questions, or if Maya, you have anything you'd like to add about that item.
Yeah, all I would say is that's another more progressive form of housing, I would say, because and very affordable, because these are the type of situations where it's someone has a room and a bathroom, and maybe there's some joint cooking facility. So again, it allows especially for a single working person that isn't ready to buy a house or doesn't have that level of income, it allows them to live in St. Helena and also work. And this could meet some of our very low income areas of wage earners. So that's why that is really important to keep in mind as we. And the timing for the code update really couldn't be happening at a better time, with knowing that our housing element's coming forward, and we still have all these great implementation actions from our current cycle that we want to implement. So once we're right now, just to take a little diversion of where we are in the zoning code, we're actually in the midst right now of writing the residential standards, and that includes single family, multifamily. I believe the mixed use as well. And so, and I'm hoping that, before the end of the year, targeting after the election in November, we can have a joint meeting with the council and the planning commission to just talk about what those new draft standards look like. And are they right sized for our community? Do we think they're feasible? Hopefully get some feedback from developers as well. So this is more, I think, for the exercise today, when you see like a certain type of housing mentioned, it's kind of high level, but we're not very far from actually dissecting the actual development standards of what that would look like in our new code.
One comment I'll quickly make on the single room occupancy is that in the fabric of communities, towns, going back for a long, long time, the idea of rooming houses, single room occupancy, it's part of a fabric of a kind of full spectrum community that has a history. And maybe we've stepped away from that a little bit, but I think there's plenty of precedent in the history of towns and communities that this is a very valuable asset in looking at this.
Mayor Ellsworth, I think Mary had a question.
Mary, I see you.
Really just a comment. I think there's some overlap between this and item number 2, which does talk about co-housing, which is another way that I think people talk about single room, but sort of more of the dormitory type living or congregate type living, as opposed to a complete detached or apartment where you have all your cooking and every kind of facility. So there's a bit of overlap there, I think.
So if it's okay, I'll just continue moving on. And I think we talked a little bit about item 7, which has to do with parking overlay. And if there are no questions with that, I'm going to have Maya sort of talk about, Maya, if it's okay, line 8, which has to do with, higher density housing. So I know that this is something that the Lisa West Consulting Group, I believe, is working on. So Maya, do you want to comment on that?
Mm-hmm. So we're not looking at changing any of our densities right now in the code, just to clarify, but we are looking at our zoning map, areas where we can rezone areas that are currently not zoned to housing to potentially higher density, to redesignate them to high density zoning. And the other item that this talks about is restrict construction of large single family units, including current floor area ratios and setback requirements. And so that, as I think we noted in our recommendations memo from the consultant, that we got a lot of feedback that the scale of new homes that are being built in our neighborhoods around the downtown just is not really the right type of fit and form for that particular street, or even if you call it a district in a neighborhood. So we're doing an FAR exercise right now to look at what are some potential ways that we can change the outcome of how those homes are looking, so they're not people aren't looking to maximize the FAR. For example, that seems to be a trend. And it ends up having very bulky looking homes that don't necessarily respect the character of other homes on the street. And this will come alongside with design guidelines that will be paired up and coming to the council next year, along with in tandem with the zoning code update, to further help articulate roofs and make sure that we have those little things that when you stand and look at a house, you say, there's something just wrong about it. In the design guidelines, that actually will be more of the fine tuning. So I think it's like a two-prong approach with, as it particularly relates to what can we do to overcome the issue with, overscaled homes in the neighborhood. Any questions on that?
Anna?
Oh, I'm not muted. I just had a question. Is that only in a certain area, or is that also in like the bigger properties, like the vineyard space? I just noticed that very large house going in when you walk down to the river. Is it also those areas, or is it just in town? I don't understand how that works for the maximum size that you can build. I think that house is like 8,000 square feet.
Yeah, I did forward that comment to the consultant. So when we get into the ag areas, I don't think we're going to tackle that one right now, but I think that's an appropriate comment, because I think where that still makes sense is, you're still looking at the context, right? So you have a very rural agrarian setting, and then you have a monstrous house, right, that interrupts some of those views. So sure, people should be able to build a house, but I think that's something else that we can look at with the consultant in terms of the appropriateness of the size.
So right now what this is in a certain area in town.
So right now we're working on our standards for all the residential zoning districts. I would consider the agriculturally zoned in a separate category, but those do allow for residential development. So when we come up with the development standards for that, we'll make sure that we look at it through the similar lens, that we don't want to have too much bulk and mass. I'm trying to remember if it'll either be right with these residential design guidelines, or it will follow as the next set that comes to the council and the commission.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, seeing no other. Please go ahead. I'm seeing no other questions at this point.
Sure. So I just want to be cognizant of time here. So, and I'm trying to zoom in as best as possible. So I think we're on, let me zoom out, focusing a little bit. And again, these are all focused on the zoning code update. So 8, and we talked a little bit about 8. And so 9 really has to do with modifying the existing overlay and creating supplemental standards related to the manufactured housing overlay district. Maya, do you have any other comments you want to add to this?
No, other than we are looking at all our current overlay districts to determine are they still useful, what are the standards in them, or could those standards be part of another base district. But, my immediate, not having seen anything, my immediate response is, the mobile homes are a unique form of development in the community. So I understand why it was done as an overlay. So that would also be something that will be coming to the council and the commission in this next work effort to see where that, what we change about it.
Thank you. So I'm going to go here to our next page, and I'm going to just scroll out. For any of these here, are there any questions on page 2 that we have that relate to clarification on the zoning code update, or are there any points, Maya, that you might want to talk about?
In general, on this page, there are a couple of references to the inclusionary housing ordinance, in particular, HE4A. So that was one that I spent some time with talking to Lisa Weiss Consulting about, and how we're going to tackle that, because they are tasked with taking a fresh look at our IHO ordinance, but at the same time, there's some additional work that needs to be done by a separate consultant, and they actually have the expertise in-house to look at, to do a nexus study, for example, an economic analysis to look at our fees, our impact fees, and they can also do some of the land valuation exercises that's needed to inform whether our inclusionary ordinance is broken, what needs to be amended, and really the important test that I'd like some time to take once we get some initial feedback from them is it's really important for communities to actually take their draft ordinance and take it to a handful of local developers to get feedback on it from them, because we don't want to have any surprises in our development community when we're getting ready to take this to the finish line. And I would say that comment goes for a lot of pieces of this zoning code. There's certain things where I see the input of various stakeholders really important early on, and a courtesy sit down with them, if you will, before we release, a public draft out. So that's a work in progress that will be happening simultaneously with the zoning code update.
Thank you. I think that thought of that sort of early communication to vet some of the issues and make sure everybody's on the same page. I mean, I think that's sort of this idea of a housing strategy where once we are ready to move forward, we've already vetted some things that won't come up later. Okay, so with that, were you going to walk through these items, 10, 11, 12, 13? Was that the thought, Priya?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I can go through these. So item 10 really talks about vertical and horizontal mixed use. And again, the code update is going to define what this is. So, and there's specific standards that it will relate to. I'll let Maya, if you have any more comments on item 10, I'll let you talk about that.
I don't really have much more to add other than we currently don't have a mixed use zone in the city, so I'm excited to see, again, how this brings forward more housing opportunities in St. Helena, especially since we're not, growing land areas. We just need to be more creative with how we do infill, and mixed use, I think, in the right places in the city is really a great opportunity to help us make our RENA numbers and bring forward more affordable and a variety of housing.
And I guess, Maya, do you want to also talk a little bit about 11 too, because I think that there are some similarities in terms of the topic?
Yeah, the live work units in non-residential zoning districts. I think, the whole area, I think around Safeway and the parking lot there. I mean, I've seen and had great conversations with people about, wow, what a great location, underutilized space. What could we envision there to really, create some energy there? And that's, to me, one of the best outcomes of density. It's a word that sometimes is very contested, but I truly believe, we have a true downtown in St. Helena. And I think what will make our downtown even more livable is bringing in housing units, and whether they be through mixed use, the live work concept. So these are all things that, similar to the other code sections I mentioned, when we get the draft guidelines, or excuse me, the draft development standards, we'll get a sense for, what is the scale of those, the height, what are the living areas going to look like, and start really being able to visualize the locations of those in the city and how we can really maximize our underutilized land use areas.
Okay, any questions or thoughts from the council there? Seeing none. Okay.
I think we talked a little bit about 12 and the inclusionary.
Mm-hmm.
And 13.
Do you have any other comments, Maya, on item 13, which has to do with waiving fees for affordable housing development?
Yeah, nothing. I would just echo what Lisa Wise put in her memo there. She said, incentives and community benefits will be addressed in the new affordable housing chapter. It's a little premature. I haven't really gotten into the details of that, but it's great for them to see. This table. I really want to give great praise to Priya, because this provides a great checks and balances for them as they're going through writing the code. Did we check all the, did we do what is needed for that part of the housing element? And so this has been an incredible guidepost, if you will, for our consultant team as they navigate through writing the development standards and the various sections of affordable housing.
And we're now on our last page here for this year one, and I'll hand it over to you, Maya, just to comment on item 14. If you have any comments on that.
Let's see. This one has to do with special housing needs of seniors and persons with disabilities, targeting 20% to meet the senior household and 10%. So I think this kind of speaks to an overarching goal that as all housing elements are required to do to meet the state requirements is to, particularly note the special needs of seniors and those with disabilities. And so we will craft something as we get to that part of the ordinance that speaks to what we're doing for those particular segments of the population that are have needs that are often not addressed in most general community housing strategies.
Well, one of the components that I'd like to see as sort of a somehow included is the concept of building equity. So when we're looking at workforce and affordable housing, that we're also being cognizant that to be able to provide a pathway to home ownership or whatever the programs may be to helping people build equity. If they're paying less in rent, what are the programs so that perhaps some of that through education, through whatever mechanisms may be available, so that we're also thinking about helping folks build equity and a pathway to home ownership. So I just want to make sure that that's part of the conversation. Any other thoughts, Council? Oh, go ahead, Priya.
Well, I was just going to ask if so that was year one, and as we reference frequently, it really is related to the zoning code update. So are there any other questions or comments from the council that we can help you with?
I'm seeing Mr. Knudsen.
I think it's totally appropriate to bundle those in, Priya and Maya. I think that makes sense. So, and those don't seem difficult to me. So we haven't labeled any of them difficult, have we?
Some of them are.
I think we. Oh.
Go ahead.
I think we tried to label. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think we did try and label them as medium or difficult based on the fact that we are hiring a consultant, and that does take some resources, and so they're part of that. But the good news is that, as we just referenced, these are happening right now. So we're working towards getting that done.
Yeah, I guess I would say there's sort of two sides to difficult. Difficult is difficult decisions, difficult for the community, difficult for council. And then there's just sort of like pounding through the work, right? And that's, is it a simple amount of time? We just need 4 hours to adjust the language, or do we need, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to sort of capture the fact that there are different elements of difficulty associated with these things. And to me, the year one efforts, they're not that difficult. I mean, they require effort, but thanks.
Anna, am I seeing Anna?
Yeah, I just have a perspective from my perspective. I'm thinking it's difficult because we don't have specific staff working on housing for us. We have 2 in planning, and they have a bunch of other responsibilities that we ask them to do, and all of this is on top of it. So when I look at this document, I am so grateful for it because it shows a huge amount of work, and it shows how much that we've committed to as a council in terms of policy, saying that we are moving forward with this. It's an incredible year to be having the zoning update happening. And so I see it moving forward, and my concern is always, how are we going to get it done with the staff that we have? And I think that this is a great move forward, and it gets it so that it's organized and prioritized. So I understand the difficult in there because of that. That's my comment.
Thank you. If there's no other council comment at this point, I'm going to take a moment and open it to the public before we move on to the year 2. Priya, are you seeing any public comment at this point on the year 1 where we've gotten so far?
Well, I do see some hands that are raised, so I am going to allow these public comment people to speak. So just give me 1 second. So last name, Dervin, you should be able to speak now.
Hi, City Council and staff. I just wanted to mention, I don't know in this process today this would fit in, so I'll just throw this out here, that these recurrent and worsening disasters are really serving as a cautionary evidence that it's dangerous to depend too heavily on our tourist industry. And it's clear that a close-knit community with a healthy middle class is going to be what sustains St. Helena over the long haul. So it seems the city has wanted to avoid large housing projects in favor of small infill projects. And I think that we need both. And I think also that we need to go beyond what is legal or required in terms of number of units, because providing ample affordable housing opportunities is going to be key to the long-term viability of St. Helena. So today I'm asking that as you guys go forward, and especially with the zoning things coming up and so forth, that you do everything you can in the process to make affordable housing as user-friendly and doable as possible, and to support to the fullest extent that you can the efforts of local nonprofits that are going to be looking to throw in on some things and be of a big assist, hopefully, in getting housing established. So I really hope that you will consider having a goal of going far beyond what the state requirements are going to be, because we're just going to keep having higher and higher demand on affordable housing, particularly since so much of our job labor force here are low to middle income careers, whether it's the service industry, farm workers, clerks, and all the rest. I just think we can't overdo it on the affordable housing. So it's very encouraging to see you guys doing this. And I know you all care and you're working really hard. And I really thank you for that and applaud your efforts. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there additional public comment?
We do have additional public comment. Mr. Krebs, go ahead. Mr. Krebs, you're muted. Let's try one more time.
Mr. Krebs, the mute.
Okay, let me try just one more time. Okay, we'll go ahead and come back to him, but we do have additional.
Oh, am I ready?
I'm sorry.
Okay, here you go.
Mr.
Yep, there you go.
Okay. First of all, I want to just endorse all the things that Nancy Gervin said. They're all important, but I want to applaud all the work that's been done. However, there's one item that has just drove me nuts and it's the column that says notes, and it always refers to ZCU, and I can't find ZCU.
So are you looking for some guidance from the planning staff where something is?
Not necessarily now, but if somebody could get back to me just so I can tie it in. I've created my own spreadsheet to follow all this, so we're very interested and very committed to seeing this through. It obviously is very much favorable to workforce housing, as you know, which is our want.
Zoning code update.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you, David. All right, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on now to our next.
Yes, Mr. McBroom, you can speak.
Good afternoon, everybody. Great subject, one of my favorites. I'm a little surprised that in the year one goals, there's no mention of ADUs. I know it comes up later in the discussion, I think, Priya, but it seems to me that the powers that be in affordable housing are looking at ADUs as sort of a win-win. That people who have large amount of property and, as we said, are land rich but cash poor have the opportunity to put an income producing property that could service low income people. I think it's on the number of them that can be done is really large. It's not city land, it's not city money. Seems to me that we ought to, as a city, find a way to facilitate and encourage ADU development.
Yeah.
So could someone comment on why it's not in the first year goals?
Okay. Tom, are those your comments?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'd be interested in discussing that. I think we do have some thoughts about it, and we've faced that, Tom, sort of again and again and again. And later or now, I think we should talk about sort of the sense of the council around granny units. Absolutely.
Okay, so Mary,
we've amended it. Code.
Well, we did just process some amendments to our code related to ADUs. We took steps in terms of size and location. So there are some fairly recent amendments. I know there was one commentator who wanted us to go further, but we recently revised that section of the code. In my mind, sort of the major issue to address is maybe a deed restriction on the units or making sure that they're actually rented out to somebody. I think that's an important piece that we haven't tackled.
And I think that's been the critique in the past, is that in general, ADUs in town have been used to increase square footage rather than to create rentable homes. I think it's been a concern.
Mm-hmm.
And so weaving that into discussion about how we incentivize that for actual housing. So in the interest of time, I think we better move on and get into our year two. Priya, is that where we are now?
Yes, thank you. Yes, we are in year two. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to hand it over to Maya. And Maya, you can just tell me when you want me to go to the next page so that you can sort of cover some of these points here. And I think some of your questions that have been asked, we'll address them here. So let me share my screen. And I'm going to make it bigger. So this is, again, year two. And I'm going to hand it over here to Maya to kind of talk a little bit about some of these items here.
Yeah, and so just to be clear, these are items that will continue to be worked on post the zoning code adoption, but not necessarily part of the scope of work for Lisa Weiss Consulting. And the first one, the HE1B, this was drafted, when our growth management system checks and balances was, a very big part of how we issue building permits. And then earlier in the year, the SB 330 got passed, and it put a big wrinkle in the ability for cities to enforce their growth management ordinances and systems. So very likely that that part of our code is going to go away, just a heads up. And maybe we might have discussed this at a joint meeting before, but so that's just kind of the status of that one. The next one on line 2, give projects that include affordable housing units priority access to water and sewer resources. That one's, again, not directly related to the code update, but it's basically wanting to connect, building housing with being aware of the tax on our infrastructure. The next one, and just raise your hand if you have any questions as we go through these. The next one on line 3, actually we've already done part of this implementation action, which talks about the city eliminating the current requirements for a use permit for multifamily projects in high density districts and also in the medium density districts. So now by and large, multifamily housing is in the permitted use category. We're going to further fine tune that to remove constraints. And the overall goal of this, as you'll see at the very beginning, the sentence is talking about streamlining the review. We were all required to put these checklists together in accordance with Senate Bill 330, which one of the requirements of it is it said, hey, cities, you can't just have like an application checklist with an enormous list of, oh, and by the way, you need to add this and this and this. You need to come up with a very clear list of items, and once the applicant meets that, you need to move them through the process. And so this particularly applies to affordable housing. So I think we're by and large doing a lot of this implementation action. So that's good news to report on. And then if there's no questions on that, we'll go to line 4. Which talks about fast tracking housing developments that meet lower income and special housing needs. And again, this touches a little bit also to the streamlined process through SB 330. And I know I'm going to keep trying to move through this so we get through this in a good, timely manner. The next item is line 5. Consider adding creative housing development and design goals into the general plan and housing element. So again, this talks a little bit about some of the things on the previous page where we were looking at co-housing and maybe cottage court development. So I think that one's a little bit repetitive. And then number 6, line 6, consider amendments to the second dwelling unit ADU ordinance. And as Councilmember Koberstein mentioned, we just did that exercise earlier in the spring to bring our ordinance into compliance with the state law changes that happened in January of this year. And we'll continue to look and refine our ADU ordinance as needed to meet the needs of the community. I also wanted to add that.
Anna, am I seeing a question?
I do. I have one question with ADUs here, because that part about encouraging the people to be able to afford ADUs instead of just having it be the most wealthy that put them in. Is that with the I think a big piece of that is developing these design templates so they're actually less money to put in for people, so more people could afford them. Is that something that we don't have now that we still need to do?
Yeah, there's a countywide consortium that's working on that's the Napa ADU a group, and I believe one of Aaron's from my staff is the lead liaison from the city that's participates on that. But the templates is something that I think holistically many counties have realized they should partner and join forces in that, because if it meets bottom line building code, that could save homeowners a lot of money from hiring an architect each time. So that's a really good point. We'll keep you apprised on how those templates are coming along, because that would be definitely a great resource to add to our website or to point people to the countywide.
And to have that sooner than later. So to have that, if it is available, make sure we have that in year 1. and not wait for it if it is something that can help people get them in.
I concur with that. I think that may be a real incentive to move, for folks to move forward.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm seeing Mary's hand.
Yeah, I mean, as we're going through this, we've got ADUs in several places here, and I do hope that after we get through this, we maybe reorganize it a bit so that all the ADU stuff is running concurrently, so we know what the whole assignment is, instead of all the separate little pieces.
Yeah, so, yeah, well, and definitely, of course, in our new and improved, when we do our next housing element, we'll have, you know, the goal, policy, and then all the implementation actions related to ADUs in one place, and hopefully we'll keep it that way. Yeah, thank you. If there's no other comments on ADUs, I believe we're on line 7. We talked a little bit about, this is approving deed restrictions program that would commit housing funds for the purchase of local homes, condos, I haven't been involved in any of that, particularly since I've joined the city this year, but I think that's definitely an ongoing aspirational goal that we can discuss more, in particular as we rewrite some of the policies and prioritize. The next one is line 8, and the first bullet and the last bullet are items that will be done in the zoning code. The overarching goal implementation is explore the possibility of allowing mixed use and live work in non-residential zoning districts, which I think we've addressed that pretty well in the previous conversation. So unless there's more discussion, I'll just move right on into the next one. Line 9. Review and revise development standards pertaining to second units. Ensure development of second units is physically and financially feasible. So that speaks to Mary's comment of putting them all together in one place. And then I believe we're on line 10. Provide public information regarding second units and develop a guide for homeowners. And so that dovetails also into the work we're doing with the Napa ADU group of promoting it. I know we did already have a handout on our website, and I have asked my staff to update that just so we have an easy place for all the development standards in one location on our website. Let's see, then we can move to line 11, address farm worker housing needs. The city will contribute staff time and resources as appropriate to countywide farm worker housing efforts that may occur during the housing planning period. And again, I would, categorize that, we talked about senior housing, people with disabilities, farm workers fall into that same goal of segments of the population that sometimes are left out. And then line 12.
Well, just want to jump in quickly on that one a little bit. I think there may be an opportunity with our industrial partners in the area of sort of a shared conversation on that. Many of the, larger industries are water partners with the city, and also, depend upon this, the ability to have a workforce. So I think there's a dialogue that extends outside just the city with the commercial industrial partnerships that we have that may give us something extra in this conversation if we kind of look beyond just the city limits, but to who is served by this housing. And I just want to make that point in there, that I think there's a good communication going on around the whole county now, as we're seeing. And so having it tie into this as well would be important.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you for that comment. I think we're on line 12 now. Explore the potential of using housing trust fund money to purchase existing housing for conversion to restricted affordable housing and commit funding as appropriate. And that's something that I'll continue to collaborate with the city manager on and our finance department that's to the extent that the city can continue to put money in that fund, it just opens up that many more opportunities for us to buy land or convert housing that we can manage to just increase our base of affordable housing. So that's a great tool that we have as our affordable housing fund.
And I think it would be important to add that we've actually done some of this already over the last several years. So this is not something that's new to the city. We've assisted in the purchase of a number of different properties. Some of them have been bare land. Some of them have had housing on them that's been converted with additional housing to be added later. So this is something that we've done. I don't know if it's miraculous. We're doing it. So it's important to acknowledge that, I think.
Good comment. Let's see, we're at the bottom of the page on 13. Consider completing a nexus study and updating the housing inclusionary fee. So this one mirrors the comment in the year one of some of the things that we are going to be doing as part of the, I know it says not directly related to the code update, but we will be hiring a separate consultant to look at our fees, land costs, the cost of building housing, and provide some input to us so we can have a better understanding of what are the market forces and how we should be setting our, not just our inclusionary ordinance, but also our fees, which we know are woefully low, right? And then we'll go to line 14. This is consider establishing an enhanced infrastructure finance district with Napa County or other cities in order to have the capacity to sponsor tax increment financing for affordable housing. I don't know, Mark, if you want to chime in. I don't know enough about the city's history if we've actually been able to use that already.
We had a good policy discussion in, I believe, late 2019. And the plan here, according to the schedule, would be to revisit this next year. It was a conversation in the context of City Hall replacement. So we learned a lot of good information, received a lot of good community feedback. The question for the council will be, is this still of interest, and when to schedule the conversation in the future. So right now, it's lined up under this structure for a year 2 conversation.
Thank you. If there's no other discussion on that item, we can go to number 15, which basically is encouraging the city to use its website and other resources to promote alternative energy technology options. So that's something that's easy. And I've actually already started a discussion with our building department about it. So when things maybe quiet down over the winter and we're not preoccupied with other things, that would be something that I think would be very helpful and also helps us with our climate goals as well. Item 16, provide public information on energy conservation measures, and that speaks similar to the topic above it. And then item 17, require bicycle and pedestrian amenities and connectivity surrounding areas in all new housing developments, and support programs to develop more local and regional walking, biking trails. And so I believe we have a trail subcommittee that's already working on some of that. So this, I would say this one's underway. And so we have that checked in the fiscal year 2021 box. Then moving to line 18, continue to apply the municipal code provisions pertaining to water resources, and the city will continue to require water efficient landscaping. So that the code will include the WELO requirements in it. And that's something that's very common in cities in California. Line 19, consider adopting a green building utility allowance to encourage energy efficient development and provide additional subsidy for affordable housing developments. And I guess that just stands on its own. It's similar to some of the other incentives we're trying to have developers build more green buildings. And then line 20, provide educational materials at City Hall through press and directly interested parties to educate real estate professionals, property owners, tenants on their rights, responsibilities, and resources available to address fair housing issues. And that's, I believe that's something that's typically required in housing elements and part of fair housing law. So that, I believe, Priya, is that the end of our
Yes, it is the end of the year 2, and as discussed, we'll make the changes in terms of combining things and revisiting things so that they're accurate. So thank you and this is one of the reasons why we wanted to do this. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now.
Do we have, were there some of the long-term goals you wanted to present to us to see if what we wanted to do with? Is that something that's part of this discussion list here?
If you see anything that's a long-term goal that catches your attention and you think it belongs in a nearer term category, that's what we would be looking for. So if you look at all of the additional attachments after the first 2, that's organized by the structure that's provided for in the housing element. And some of those may be items that you see as more of a shorter term priority. Obviously, year 1, most of that's in motion right now with the zoning code update. There are a few other ideas. Year 2 is a bit of a mixed bag in terms of follow through on items, but also a few new ideas, some easy, low hanging fruit. But we're looking for additional feedback on anything in the longer term bucket that you see as a nearer term opportunity for us.
Are there any thoughts on that? I'm seeing David's hand.
Yeah, I don't have a comment directly on that, Mr. Presswich, but I have to say for those watching and also to Maya and Priya, thank you, actually, because there's a really good alignment, it seems to me, between the community and council, its representative, and staff regarding these elements. So this doesn't seem it seems squarely in line with both what the town would like to do, what we're required to do from the state, and it strikes me that it's a pretty good approach. So I'd like to say thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. One of the areas that I'm just seeing going down through here is the tie-in with Napa County's Proximity Housing Home Buyers Assistance Program. That's in the long term now. And if that's an existing program already in Napa or Napa County, and there's a way to tie into it, and once again, I want to respect staff capacity and where we are, but any sort of techniques or strategies for helping create home buyers, I think, is worth looking at.
Mayor, if I may, I did want to acknowledge, I believe Andrea Clark from the Housing Authority, I asked her if she's welcome to listen in and hear your comments. So I did want to let you know, I do see her as one of the participants here. So
great.
Thank you, Andrea, for being here tonight.
Yeah, I think that work that they're doing that sort of ties in all the jurisdictions is really remarkable. And so I just want to make sure we keep that dialogue open. Is there any other council comment at this point? I will open it for public comment one more time here, unless I'm seeing another hand come up. Okay, so I'm going to open it to public comment. Priya, will you help guide us through that?
We do have additional public comment. Ms. Stevenson, you can go ahead.
Hi, guys. I see this as a great organizational feat to put this together, and I realize it was a lot of work. But as you know, I'm looking to have some action on housing now. And what I see is that we'll have a rezoning program possibly mid to late near next year, and then we'll be working on the housing element so that it can be ready in another year and a half. And meanwhile, we're not doing anything to actually build housing. And I'd like to offer a couple of things. Number one, instead of saying how can we fit our housing opportunities into our existing staff, I think we should be setting some priorities on what needs to happen and figure out what resources you need to make that happen. All of this stuff is great, and it's stuff that we should have done 10 years ago, but we did a white paper in 2018. We'll have a zoning change in 2001. We'll have a general plan in 2023. What are we doing to build housing during those 5 years? Got a couple of suggestions on stuff that could be done now, and one has to do with the things that you've put into the long-term category, which is all the sustainable funding resources. We suggest that there should be an RFP and a consultant hired now in this fiscal year to look at all the 8 different sustainable funding sources that were listed in the white paper, transfer tax, including the stuff that Mark just talked about, and figure out what are the pros and cons and the opportunities for that, so that while we're doing all this other work, we can also figure out how we could actually pay to preserve land and build housing, etc. If we wait till 2005 to even start looking at that, we'll be a whole 10 years out before we have a sustainable funding source. Secondly, would love to see there'll be a project initiated now talking about what David said before about inventorying of current housing. I mean, we have had so little housing starts and only 8 rental units built in the last 10 years. So we can take the 2010 census and the permits from housing for the last 10 years and do a housing inventory so that we know what we have now and what is available. We could look at how many of those houses took moderate income families out, demolished, and built second homes. And then we could start looking at the impact of what's the advantage and disadvantages of having those, and how can we work in the kinds of things we need to balance that with actual housing to the town. If we don't have that data, we can't do it. But there are things that can be done if we have that data, and I don't see any reason why that can't be done before the end of the year. There are lots of funding sources right now that we could be looking at, and we'd like to see the city use your existing staff, or if you have to hire somebody, or use us for help, and look at HCD, Department of Transportation, Enterprise, all the different funding sources that have NOFAs that are coming out in first and second quarter next year, and have a strategy on how to apply for those funds, what to use them for, what needs to happen to get those applications in.
Ms. Stevenson, please consider the time limit. Coming to the end of it.
Okay. I want to see some action. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think those are excellent comments, and taken to heart that we want to see things being built and finding a way to make that happen. So thank you for the comments. Are there any other public comments at this point?
I don't see any additional public comment at this time.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the council. And Maya, where are we now or Priya, in our discussion?
Sure. So thank you so much for that. I think, so we talked about the short-term year 1 and the short-term year 2. I think this is now an opportunity again to continue the discussion on, are there any items in the longer term, I know Mary, you just brought up one, that we need to reconsider in terms of you have questions on, or questions about priorities. Mark, I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to add to on your comments on the longer term, but I think that's sort of the direction that staff would need from this workshop.
Paul, Mr. Doring, Vice Mayor?
Well, yeah, I'm looking at the one, I don't know what page this is on. It's HEI or HE1.G, but it has to do with local preference policies for emergency personnel. To me, this seems a little bit more urgent and important for us, given the number of emergencies we're having, whether they be fire or earthquake or lightning strikes or this and that. That one, and I know it says staff is checking in on this item to see whether we can develop a policy that targets emergency workers. And I like to add bulldozer operators. I put them in the category, and many other private industries that are helping along these fronts. I would at least ask the council to maybe not now, but consider that moving up to become a little bit more urgent under current circumstances. Capacity is obviously an issue, and resources, financial resources are obviously an issue, but it'd be nice to have somebody report back on that fairly soon, in terms of whether it's doable. Thank you.
Other comments from council? I'm certainly supportive of the comments about looking at the available funding sources. If our strategies include land banking and needing the funds to move forward on projects, then I think keeping our eyes out where those funds may come from is important. So I'd certainly be in support of that being part of what we're doing, so that we're ready to move when opportunity arises. Okay. Any other thoughts at this point? And so, in terms of a document, today you're looking for some direction to move forward with what we have, taking some comment from us. Is there opportunity, if somebody sees something here that they missed today, for that to be submitted from the council or the community? In a sense, can we move forward with what we have and gain some traction, but a window or door open if somebody has a comment that was not able to be put in today? I just don't want to lose time waiting.
I think the way I would recommend we approach it is we will fold in the year one items into the work plan for the city, so we keep track of that, and that's part of a quarterly update. And as new issues arise, and through a periodic review at the city council meetings, that would also serve as an opportunity to add new items to the list. So if there is, for example, a notice of funding availability that we think is a sweet spot for St. Helena that may add value, it's something that we can, we would independently bring to you most likely, but it can also, that or other items can also be adjusted on our work plan and added to it. I think of it in some ways as it's helpful to have it approved so that it's the council's work plan that we follow and work on, but it's also a living document for the council as priorities and change and shift. So I think that's the vehicle by which I'd recommend it continue to receive a fresh review. And it also creates the flexibility to add and adjust priorities as needed.
Okay, thank you. Mary?
Yeah, I'd like to see this maybe come back to us massaged a little bit, so that where we do have one concept in several places, they are grouped together so we know what the strategy is for that particular thing, whether it's co-housing or ADUs. But following up on these comments, I think I would like to take a good look at the financial issues. Some of them require ballot measures, and so the timing there is more, it needs to be mapped out before we can work on them. And maybe just a separate listing of all the financial tools. A lot of them came out of the white paper.
Any other council comment?
Well, let me add this one comment. I'm a little bit more optimistic than others in terms of the action piece. I think it is true that the city has been extremely remiss in terms of doing its fair share especially for its own workers here in the private and public sector. But I'm hopeful that the city will be able to put its money where its mouth is. I think, frankly, it's a land issue. We need to provide land for this housing. And we have a lot of these different policies, but some of them really don't apply here. Why don't they apply? Because land and property is so extremely valuable here, and folks are not going to necessarily give up that value. So the government has to step in and say, look, how could we mediate and moderate those circumstances? I don't think anyone's jumping around for SROs. We should look into all of these things, but it doesn't. The policies don't necessarily match St. Helena, and that's sad to say. We don't have a full spectrum society here. Absolutely not, right? So the government has to help in that regard, and we need to find pieces of land to make this work. That's where the action, in my view, has to happen. Because these policies really are not going to incentivize. Maybe we can create some incentives, but I'm not really hopeful. The one thing I am hopeful when Maya gives little examples of where it has been done. You talk about the one in Hillsburg and maybe in Washington. Those give more concrete hope to me that they can be done in a place like St. Helena where property values are just so high. We have to be somewhat realistic. I don't know what else we can do other than having government contribute to the land needs. So that's it.
David?
Yeah, Mr. Doring, Vice Mayor Doring, you really bring up a good point, and I think that's also something we can learn from is the experience of other small cities, small towns that have extremely high property values. It just in my mind, besides Healdsburg, I'd also think about Carmel, for example, really small town, even more restrictive than we are. And, what have they done to solve these problems? If anything, we can learn from other folks. I'd like to. And maybe that's an action item.
If yes, and our local government being part of the solution and helping with that regarding land being this commodity that is so expensive here. And so if we can help somehow equalize that to make things happen. Anna?
My comment is just, I am hopeful because I'm hearing more and more in the community, people that have land and might have business be interested in this and understand the need for housing because of how difficult it is to hire people and the long commutes. And I just see this as a topic that's coming up more and more people are aware of it and want to work on it. So that gives me hope too, that we'll be able in the future to have partnerships with people and be able to really take action on this.
Great. So are we giving you what you need, Priya, Maya, Mark, in terms of something to move forward with? Do you have that from us today?
I believe so. And I think that it would be helpful for us to continue to work with Councilmember Koberstein, Councilmember Knutson, and as Councilmember Koberstein mentioned, massage a few items, further group items together, perhaps even document some of the successes, as Vice Mayor Doring had pointed out, that are already in motion and have been completed. And also perhaps identify some opportunities that are just real, that are tangible and potentially even in motion, just to show the action side of the house here, because the zoning code update will set the table for investment, but there are other activities occurring as well. And there is a lot of activity at the state level and funding today through HCD and others where there will be opportunities, and part of our job is to get ready and be organized, and the zoning code will help us. But I think we can work with the council members and staff to bring a future conversation to the council.
Okay. Well, thank you. So with that, then we will adjourn If there's nothing else for the good of the order, and we will reconvene at 6 o'clock. So we will see everybody then. Thank you for your participation.
Bye, everyone.